Treasurer, thanks very much for your time. The intergenerational report, it assumes productivity of around 1.5%. That's higher than what we've seen in recent years. How will we go about achieving that?
You're right, it's the 30-year average, and Treasury says that is the best estimation of future productivity growth. But Australia's prosperity is highly dependent on us achieving these productivity gains, as our population will be smaller than initially thought because of COVID, and because we're an ageing population, our participation rate also comes down. So productivity is vitally important, Kieran, and the way to do that is through reform in infrastructure, reform in tax, reform through more flexible workplaces, a skills agenda, cutting red tape, digital transformation. All the initiatives that we've already got underway are vitally important to us driving higher productivity gains.
It's going to take some big reforms, though, and our political system hasn't been great at achieving big reforms in recent times. Do you accept that there will be a day of reckoning here?
Well, certainly the IGR provides some warning signs about the budgetary pressures that come with an ageing population on both the revenue and the expenditure side. Like all IGRs, they make for sobering reading because the ageing of the population does put pressure on the budget in the forecast 40-year period. But they are also premised on the fact that policy settings do not change for the next 40 years, and you and I know that policies do change over time. But the reforms that we are driving through the Parliament, will actually help get us some of these productivity gains that we need. For example, just in the last sitting fortnight, we passed through the Parliament the most significant changes to superannuation since compulsory super came in 1992. We also got mutual recognition for occupational licences to help people move more freely between states to work, which will help drive an extra $2 billion plus to our economy, as well as enabling 150,000 people plus every year to move more freely. The changes to insolvency laws are the biggest in 30 years. The changes to the digital platforms laws are world leading, will boost competition and therefore productivity. And as you know, Kieran, we've abolished with stage 3 of our tax cuts, a whole tax bracket is coming out of the tax system, and that's going to be leading to a fairer, stronger, simpler tax system.
You accept
hopefully the Labor Party come on board.
We need a greater population, and in your mind, is the immigration debate over now when you look at these numbers that you've read in the intergenerational report? Quite simply, we have to get back to some decent levels of immigration in order to maintain population growth and economic growth.
Well, you're certainly right that population is going to be vitally important, because it's one of what we call the 3 Ps that drive economic growth: participation, productivity and population growth. But what we've seen during COVID is closed borders, and Australia doesn't make up that lost ground, so much so that this is the first IGR where there is a downward revision in the population forecast. So Australia is expected to reach 38.8 million people by 2060-61. It was in the previous IGR expected to reach around 40 million people by 2054-55. So what we're now seeing is a downward revision in population. So we need to attract the best and the brightest skilled migrants to our country. They tend to be of a younger age than the overall existing population. So they not only drive a stronger economy, but they also drive a younger population, and that is vitally important as well.
Shouldn't we have more clarity then on what our plan is? Because at the moment, Singapore's got a plan for reopening, for opening its borders and so on. Where's our plan?
Well, Kieran, as you know, in the budget, we put an assumption there that said that the economy will gradually open from mid next year. It's not a policy decision, it's an assumption, and we will take a decision based on the medical advice closer to that date. And there are a number of factors that would play into a recommendation from the health experts about the opening of the borders. But we make no apologies for closing those borders early on in the pandemic, because they actually helped set us up for the strong recovery and for our successful suppression of the virus on the health front. The United Kingdom is an island, just like Australia is an island, but they didn't close their borders and they saw the virus run rampant with very deadly consequences for their population. So our decision to close our borders has helped keep us safe. They continue to help to support the economic recovery, and they will open only when it is safe to do so.
But shouldn't we have a target for when we get to 80% of the population vaccinated? That's the figure a lot of leaders, Gladys Berejiklian among them, talking about in terms of herd immunity. Shouldn't we have a sense of when we get to that point? You can maybe reset it if you need to, but at least give the Australian people some direction on that. When will we get there, in your view?
Well, Kieran, we're not putting a definitive date or number, as you say, on herd immunity. What we're saying is that we're seeking to get as many people vaccinated as fast as possible. Now, more than 7.3 million jabs have already been delivered, and 28.5% of eligible members of the population have received the vaccination. And we're focused on the more vulnerable cohorts.
Why is the government scared of targets?
Well, we're focused on getting the vaccine out as fast as possible, and we're focusing on the vulnerable cohorts. So the over 50s, more than 50% of those persons have received the vaccination. When it comes to over 60s, around 60% have received the vaccination. For the over 70s, it's approaching also close to 70%. So that's where our focus has been. But if you look at the United Kingdom, it's pretty instructive, because over 80% of their population has received the first dose. More than 60% of their population has received the second dose. Yet just yesterday, they had 18,000 new COVID cases alone. So the Delta variant is more dangerous, it's more contagious, and it doesn't mean that you can eliminate the virus. It does mean, though, that you have a safer population.
It helps giving people more clarity, doesn't it, on where we're heading? If you have a target, tell us where we're going in terms of what our aim is. Because at the moment, it seems like the vaccination program is too slow and people don't have clarity.
Well, we had in the budget a series of assumptions about the vaccine rollout, about the opening of borders. But again, the situation remains fluid. It's a challenging environment globally and domestically, but we are rolling out the vaccine as quickly as possible. We are getting more Pfizer vaccines to distribute. They're 300,000 a week, building to 600,000 a week. There has been challenges with the AstraZeneca vaccine, but that hasn't been only Australia that's been affected by the issues with the distribution of the AstraZeneca vaccine. It's been a global issue.
The Prime Minister recently got back from the G7. Should he have spent more time trying to acquire more vaccines internationally and maybe a little less time on the China issue? Focus on this clear and present danger of COVID.
Well, they're not mutually exclusive issues. Working on national security issues, bilateral relationships, as well as securing supplies of the vaccine. We're doing all those things simultaneously. It was very important that the Prime Minister attend that G7 meeting, and indeed, I think it held Australia in very strong stead to be invited to that meeting. There were many
important issues. Has the government done everything it can?
And advanced.
Have you spent every dollar possible to try and get as many different vaccines as possible? Have you done everything you can? Because it doesn't, in terms of some of the analysis, it says that some of the experts don't think you've spread your bets sufficiently.
Well, we have adopted a portfolio approach when it comes to getting vaccines. And as you know, AstraZeneca was the vaccine that we made under licence here in Australia with CSL. And that's been the vaccine where there has been issues for some of the younger cohorts. So we took the medical advice, as you'd expect us to do, which has served us well throughout this pandemic. But at the same time, we're getting more of the Pfizer vaccine coming to Australia, and we're making that as quickly available as possible. And I would implore everyone watching your program today who is eligible to get the vaccine to get that jab and to do it as quickly as possible.